Hello everyone, Jeff the Green Review here. Isn't it great to be surrounded by beauty? When my wife's not here, I have to settle for flowers. Let's talk about flowers. Both angiosperm flowers and gymnosperm cones can be male, female, or both. About 85% of plants have flowers that have both male and female parts in the same flower and are known as hermaphrodites. The male portion may mature earlier than the female portion to prevent self-fertilization. Plants that self-pollinate produce sexual offspring that are essentially clones. Heirloom seeds that produce crops nearly identical to the parent plant include self-pollinating hermaphrodite beans, soybeans, tomatoes, and wheat. Angiosperm plants that have separate male and female flowers and gymnosperm plants that have separate male and female cones on the same plant are called monoecious. The individual male and female parts may open at the same time for synchronously monoecious, or they may open at different times for consecutively monoecious plants. Species such as hollies that have separate male and female plants are called dioecious. The individual plant is not dioecious. They're either male and called androecious or female and called gynoecious. About 6% of all plants are monoecious and about 6% dioecious. What's this mean to me? Corn is a synchronously monoecious plant that has tassels that bear pollen, and each silk is part of a separate female flower. Melons are partially consecutively monoecious, as male flowers develop first on the vine, and a few weeks later mostly female flowers develop with a few male flowers interspersed. Another what's this mean to me? An interesting correlation has been noted between dioecious plants and the spread of their seeds by birds. A female plant that doesn't have to expend resources on producing pollen can produce more berries. A bird looking for berries doesn't have to expend as much energy looking for fewer berries on multiple plants when the berries are concentrated on the female plant. Most dioecious plants are tropical trees and shrubs that have fleshy fruits produced from small green flowers. And another what's this mean to me? Holly is a dioecious plant species that has male and female plants. To get pretty red berries on the female plant, a male plant must be nearby. Flies and other insects transfer the pollen between plants. In the past, holly plants were purchased at a 5-to-1 ratio of females to males. Recently, nurseries have been planting a male and female plant in each pot. Female holly cultivars often have been given names like Princess, while the corresponding male cultivar was named Prince. And another what's this mean to me? Species that have separate male and female plants may still be sexually cloned or reproduced. If a male tree is reproduced by cloning to form a cultivar that doesn't bear messy fruit or seeds, it may become popular for its low maintenance. Some cities have banned or regulated the use of female trees and their messiness. The male trees still produce pollen, and with only male trees being grown, these same towns now have problems with allergies among their citizens. If they'd instead banned the male trees, they would have had less fruit and fewer allergy problems. So let's talk about flower parts. The male part of the flower is called the stamen, which has a stalk that holds up an anther that produces pollen. The female part of the flower is called the pistil and is made up of 3 parts: the stigma, which is a sticky surface, the style, which is a long tube, and the ovary, which contains the eggs. At the base of the ovary is tissue called the receptacle. The flower is attached to the stem by the pedicel. Pollination in angiosperm flowers is the transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma. In gymnosperms, it is the transfer of pollen from the male cone to the female cone. Pollination may not lead to fertilization. For fertilization in angiosperms, the pollen grain must be transferred to the stigma, germinate, grow the length of the style, and unite with the egg in the ovary. Plants like the tomato that can be fertilized with their own pollen are called self-pollinated. Cross-pollinated plants require pollen from a genetically different plant to become fertilized. Different cultivars are required, not just different plants of the same cultivar. This becomes especially important in fruit trees when you're trying to get a crop. Most angiosperm flowers have attractive petals that help attract insects and birds to the flower. The original green covering of the bud is composed of sepals that may look like the colored petals, such as tulips, or they may look different but still be attractive, like in orchids. Many forest trees and other plants that depend on the wind for pollination have no petals on their flowers and no sepals. The male flowers release pollen into the wind, so there is no need to attract insects or birds to a pretty flower. Complete flowers contain 4 parts: the stamen, pistil, petals, and sepals. If any of the 4 parts is missing, it is an incomplete flower. A rather confusing bit of terminology is next. A perfect flower has both stamen and a pistil, but it doesn't have to have any petals or sepals. A perfect flower may be complete or incomplete. An imperfect flower has only male or female parts and is incomplete, but an incomplete flower may be perfect. The squash flower has petals, sepals, and a pistil, but it's imperfect and incomplete without the male parts or anthers. The daylily flower is complete and perfect. The 3 sepals and the 3 petals may be different colors, but they all together make a pretty flower. Oak flowers are imperfect and incomplete without petals, sepals, and a pistil. Many grass plants have perfect flowers with stamens and pistils, but they're incomplete without sepals or petals. Flowers may be single, with having just the right number of petals, or they may be double or semi-double, with having some of the stamens or the pistil, and so the male parts and the female parts being turned into more petals. So these double flowering plants have the normal sexual parts modified to become petals or sepals. Fully double flowers are infertile and may or may not be showier than the typical flower of the species. Semi-double flowers still have some sexual parts, and the others that have been modified into the petals. Some plants have a whole bunch of flowers arranged on the stem as a group. We commonly think of single flowers, like the single flower is on a rose where it comes up and there's only one flower at the end. But many flowers are compound, like this chrysanthemum, where there's thousands of flowers on a head together at the group at the top of the stem. Flower heads can be just a few flowers, or they can be, like I said, thousands. They can grow all next to each other and look like a single flower. But a single flower on this group is called a floret. The asters, daisies, and sunflowers, plus other families, have flower heads. The outer few rows of the flower head are maybe ray flowers that are sterile and produce large petals, and the other ones on the inside may be called disc flowers, and they produce the pistils, stamens, and eventually seeds. A flower head may or may not have any ray flowers or disc flowers. So what's this mean to me? Double flowers exchange sexual parts for non-sexual parts that do not produce nectar or pollen necessary for insects and bees. If you want to attract pollinating insects, plain old-fashioned cultivars are probably best. Most plants have a structure of flower parts that we call the inflorescence. The pedicel is the stem that attaches the individual flower to the plant stem. It can be short or long and can arrange the flowers into round or flat top clusters. Some inflorescences cause the stem to stop with flowers at the end and are determinate, and some have flowers continuing to arrive over time and are indeterminate. There may be single, compound, double, sterile, and fertile flowers mixed together on a single inflorescence. Examples of inflorescences are corms, cymes, panicles, racemes, spadixes, spikes, and umbrals. There are compound versions of these and other kinds of inflorescence. Knowing which inflorescence is which is important when you're trying to identify plants. A solitary flower is held on the stem by a pedicel, such as a magnolia flower or a rose. Spikes have individual flowers attached to the stem without a pedicel. Male catkin flowers on trees like oaks and birches are spikes. Spikes are indeterminate. A raceme is an indeterminate spike with flowers on pedicels. The stem between the pedicels is the peduncle. A corm is an inflorescence that individual flower pedicels attach to the peduncle at different points, but the flowers form a cluster at the top. The outer flowers open first. In umbrals, the flower pedicels radiate out from nearly the same location on the peduncle, and the outer flowers open first. Cymes are determinate, and the center flowers open first. Panicles are indeterminate and can be made from spikes, racemes, corms, or umbrals. A spadix has a large showy leaf called a bract or a spathe. The spike in the center produces the fertile flowers, such as on the calla lily and the peace lily. Female flowers may bloom first, followed by a few days later by the male flowers. That way they don't self-pollinate. Flowers on many plants are not noticeable because they do not have conspicuous petals and sepals. These inconspicuous flowers are often wind-pollinated. The plant produces extra pollen and does not waste energy on producing petals. The pollen must float through the air to find a female flower. Very few pollen grains find the female flower, but there are still many seeds produced from this method. Most evergreens, many forest trees, grasses, and grains such as corn, rice, and wheat, and many other plants are wind-pollinated. Because there's so much pollen produced, it can be counted, and weather forecasts often include a pollen count. Ragweed, oak trees, and grasses all produce enough pollen that allergies are induced in people. Pine forests are often covered in pollen during the blooming season. Some of the inconspicuous flowers are insect pollinated, especially by flies. These flowers often produce a scent, which is often foul-smelling, to attract the flies to the flowers. And this is Jeff with a Greener View. Thanks for watching.